Good morning, everybody. It's 5:05, so I guess it's about time to start. And I'm very delighted to be able to welcome you to the second day of the TEPSA Pre-Presidency Conference here in Hungary. And this panel or the topic that we would like to discuss in this parallel session today is a very broad one, and I hope we're going to be able to kind of break that down into different aspects that we can then discuss, because it's the future of the EU's enlargement policy, and that is a very crucial topic also for the future of the European Union as a whole. And I think also the recent developments, both within the European Union, but also in the accession candidate countries, and of course, all the things that happen with Ukraine, of course, give lots of things to discuss in order to then also outline the perspectives of the future of the EU's enlargement policy. Briefly to my person, I'm Funda Tekin, I'm director at Institut für Europäische Politik. I'm also a board member, and I'm the scientific lead of one of the Horizon Europe consortia who deal with the EU's relations with the Eastern neighborhood and the Western Balkan countries. I'm coordinating the project together with Michael Keding, and part of this panel is also partners of within the project. So we have just started our work, so we are not going to be able to share with you the insights of the project, but it's about the enlargement policy, and I think it's a very, very important topic. So maybe just to outline a couple of things before I then introduce the speakers and give the floor to the speakers. It's very clear that after Russia's full-scale invasion into Ukraine, there was the revitalization of the EU's enlargement policy. The EU's enlargement policy has always been named or labeled one of the EU's most successful foreign policies. And before 2022, I was really wondering, well, you know, if you realize the level of stagnation in that policy and that it's not really moving forward, and how far can it be really one of the most successful EU's foreign policy tools, that might be something to be discussed. But after, in reaction then to the geopolitical challenge posed by the war, we really saw lots of movement. So it was Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia who became accession candidate countries, and also end of 2023, Ukraine and Moldova, the decision was taken to open accession negotiations, and now we're actually waiting also for the decision to be taken on the accession negotiation framework for Ukraine and Moldova. But also with regards to the Western Balkans, there was movement. So it was Albania and North Macedonia also were given the decision to open accession negotiations. Bosnia-Herzegovina became a candidate country, and Kosovo also officially applied for candidate status. So basically, there is this whole huge geopolitical push to move forward with enlargement. At the same time, and we heard it also yesterday from the State Secretary, the process as such is a merit-based approach. So it's also the question of how do you put these things together, the geopolitical push for enlargement, the merit-based approach, rule of law, conditionality, accession criteria. So this is basically the picture that we are facing. And then also looking into the inside of the European Union, it's also the question of whether we need internal reforms for having a successful enlargement. I think also the EP elections of last Sunday might also kind of affect on the prospects of enlargement. And then, of course, there are also bilateral conflicts between some of the member states with accession candidate countries, and also conflicts in the region. So it's a broad picture that we need to discuss in terms of when we think about the future of the EU's enlargement. And I have a very great panel with distinguished speakers to actually give us some insights on their thoughts of how to go about with regards to the enlargement policy. So we have Anna Orosz, who is researcher at the Hungarian Institute of International Affairs, and she is dealing in her research with the Western Balkan countries. So she's a perfect one to give us insights from a EU perspective on the Western Balkans. We have Danijela Jacimovic, who is a professor at the Faculty of Economics of the University of Montenegro. And so she can really also give us the insight from one of the accession candidate countries. We have Yuri Yakimenko, who is joining us online, and I'm very grateful that you took the time to join us on this panel. He's from the Razumkov Center in Kiev. And then last but not least, we have Karlis Bukovskis, who is a director at the Latvian Institute of International Studies. So this is a broad panel, and the way I would like to structure it, I would like to have two brief sessions, rounds on the panel before I then open up to the questions from the audience. So the first round of questions actually should deal with what are the challenges and opportunities of the enlargement policy. So first kind of laying out the groundwork, because before we then deal with within the second round with regards to how we can go about what are the prospects of how can we manage to move ahead with enlargement. So Anna, maybe I give you the floor first in order to elaborate a bit from your perspective, what are challenges and opportunities from a Hungarian perspective, but also with view to the Western Balkan countries. Yeah, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's on. Thank you very much. First of all, let me thank you for the invitation to this interesting panel, and I'm really looking forward for the beautiful discussion during this 90 minutes period. When we first discussed the topics of this panel, there was also initiative to also a bit put into the context of how the accession experience of the CE or Hungary. And my first idea was that Hungary as a Visegrad country has been basically engaged for 20 years to share experience on enlargement and the EU accession with the Western Balkan countries. And obviously, as the basis of the enlargement process, so the enlargement policy that has been applied since the 2000s, it was created during the 1990s when the CE countries joined the European Union, and namely the Copenhagen criteria, as well as I would also point out the demand to build good neighborly relations among the in the CE countries, which obviously did not have such a challenge than in the Western Balkan countries, which faced wars in the 1990s and had a very conflicted history back to centuries. But still, we also had to tackle that kind of challenges. So in that sense, we have relevant experience to share with the Western Balkans. On the other hand, I do think that if we have a look on the Western Balkan countries and the challenges, there is a very different context. In case of disease, I do believe there's from two perspectives, they were in a much easier position. One is that because of the fall of the Iron Curtain, there was a very big political momentum to reunite Europe, the Western and Eastern part of Europe, including also the German reunification. And if we have a look on the map and also the size of the CE region and the Western Balkans, and compare the economic potential also for Western Europe, we can see that there were much more motivation also for Western Europe to integrate from economic point of view, there were much more potential in the CEE region than compared to the Western Balkans. Furthermore, obviously, the Western Balkan countries, because of the consequences of wars, they face much more their transformation process that goes hand in hand or parallel with the EU accession process. It's even more complicated than in the Central and East European countries. And from this perspective, probably Croatia's accession process is more indicative for the region, as it is. Croatia is also from the region, and the challenges that they face, and and although I also would like to remind the audience that even in the 1990s and the beginning of the 2000s, there were challenges also in various political debates about the deepening of the European integration process, as well as how to deal with the huge change in the institutional structure, because the accession of 10 countries, it really changed the status quo within the EU. If we compare that with the Western Balkans, actually we can say that the accession of the Western Balkan countries would not have such an impact on the status quo in the EU compared to the big accession boom in 2004, and then with the accession of Romania and Bulgaria. But unfortunately, from the perspective of the Western Balkans, the EU faced numerous challenges and crisis situations in the 2000s, from the financial and economic crisis, then the migration crisis, then the COVID, which basically made the EU to turn inside. And for this reason, combined with the very tough challenges that the countries face in the Western Balkans to deal with state building, transformation, democratization, as well as the EU accession process, that makes a very complicated situation. And in addition to that, I would also point out the various politically sensitive issues that top the EU accession process and actually often turn the lights away from the real reform process, including the bilateral disputes, as well as the Kosovo status question, as well as the reform end of the Bosnia and Herzegovina as a state. And for the in addition, and I would stop here. I do not want to monopolize, and there will be various questions we can discuss. But it's also important to note that the demand of the Western Balkans to catch up with the EU, and in order to become to some extent reach that competitiveness in the economic sector and build their capacity to be able to join the EU is much bigger. And let me draw attention to an aspect that is always mentioned by Dusan Rejlic, a former head of the office, the Stiftung Wissenschaftenpolitik in Brussels, who point out that the countries that are within the EU receives 11 times more financial support compared to the Western Balkan, the candidate countries, while if we take into consideration the current level of growth, then it might take 5 decades to catch up. So the challenge is huge for the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. From Danijela, from the Montenegrin perspective. So what are the challenges and opportunities?
Okay. What to say? Let's start from the beginning. That flash of enthusiasm regarding the enlargement policy has came after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I will say that war at the ground somehow united Euro and Atlantic community in the ideas how to deal with European borders, neighborhood, and of course hugely affected enlargement policy. This is actually perspective from the region. So what we can see in the last few years is that European Union has rebooting or its enlargement mechanism, or at least we would like to see it like that. And maybe I can say also that European Union gives serious consideration to maybe let some countries into the club after almost 10 years or more, because the last enlargement was Croatia, which was 2013. So when we are I will say that as this new enthusiasm in the European Union has been driven mostly by very pragmatic approach of European Commission. But from the, I will say, state level, I will say that member states would like to say, give me enlargement, but not yet. From the perspective of candidate countries, we like to yell and cry, give us enlargement yesterday. So, yes, so somehow it will be really good to find some kind of the compromise, but we are all aware that now increasing number from 26 to 27 to 36 would be very, very rocky journey, and nobody expects that it's going to be easy and fast. But let's talk about some possible dates. We have heard that probably some time target could be 2030. For some, it's already ambitions. Others says it's illusional. Third says that there is very unclear final destination of enlargement policy. On the other side, if we look candidate countries on the paper, they all do a lot of work regarding the membership, including Montenegro. I will address situation in Montenegro lately, but for example, our government, our president, he's so strict that it's going to be 2028, so it gives a lot of floor for debate. But perspective for Western Balkans, I will say that realist will say that no country is not run well. Politics is messy as ever. And what to expect? So let's remind us that we are living in a very dangerous time, and just to remind you that, for example, as I'm correct, 7 years ago in his speech, Emmanuel Macron, president, said that Europe is a safe place, guarantor of progress, prosperity, and liberal order. And I think that in one of his recent interviews, he said, our old Europe can die. So in this dangerous time, if we are all sitting in our comfortable chairs, or even, if I may say, if Europe is really taking its comfortable old position, maybe it will find us all together in very alarming position. I will say that war in Ukraine has changed calculus. Now we have enlargement, was that it's driven by the fear. When we talk about your enlargements, it was this enlargement were actually supported by great hope for the bright future. So just as economists, just to remind that sometimes history give us idea that chaos can be more deeper and more dangerous. So from that point of time, I would like to suggest that probably we should all think that enlargement as a process and as a momentum cannot be actually suspended for for long. Of course, there are questions that we have to address, but not only about this enlargement, because if we are living some new enlargement vision or the strategy, maybe we should also address, is this the last big European enlargement? And of course, we have to address properly questions like merits, drawbacks, and practicalities. So for now.
Thank you, Danijela, for giving us this perspective from the Western Balkan countries and also highlighting a bit the time management dilemma that we might be facing in terms of expectations that might be differ between the candidate countries and in the European Union. So now I would like to turn to Ukraine, actually, Yuri. I don't know whether you are here, you can hear us. So what are from your perspective, challenges and opportunities? Oh. Okay. Okay, so he's not. Okay, good. Okay, so this is, we are now really feeling that there is war in Ukraine. So there is actually currently an attack. So Yuri cannot participate here in online because he needed to find a safe place. So we need to go on without him. So Karlis, I'm turning right away to you to then discuss a bit your perspectives, because when we were also previously talking, for me it's the Baltic countries are more really seeing the geopolitical need, and what we've already also now see how really how much pressure there is for this need in order to guarantee security. So the geopolitical push for enlargement. So what is your perspective then on the challenges and opportunities?
Thank you, Funda. Thank you, Funda, very much. I hope everybody hears officially. Good morning. So yeah, when I was preparing my notes this morning, I didn't expect that colleagues are gonna take up some of them, and I also didn't expect that Yuri is not going to be joining in, but at least for now. But Danijela is absolutely right. Ukrainian situation and the situation in Ukraine has changed the enlargement calculus, and of course Yuri's current situation just reapproves this. So in this case, this is somewhat strange that enlargement, one of the new enlargement criteria is that you have to die for European Union membership. Maybe that's a discussion that we had with Mariam yesterday, which influenced my thinking about this. And this is a bit of a dramatic statement, but let me quickly dissect this one, because it looks like Russia and its cronies are ready to start civil wars and actual wars in different places in the candidate countries, just in order to prevent the EU membership. And that's a major change since the 90s. It's enlargement, what we call EU's enlargement, Putin apparently calls Western expansion. He didn't do that. Well, Russia didn't do that in the 90s, but that's not now the case. And what from the geopolitical perspective, we have to take into account that, of course, the Baltic states were the first of the former Soviet Union countries to join the European Union, but we also have to keep in mind that we were a buffer zone. Everybody is a buffer zone. That's somewhat one of the criteria of EU accession, that and therefore also somewhat the enlargements have been successful, but stagnating recently is partially related to this. Somewhat reminds me of the DJ Khaled album title, "Suffering from My Own Success," right? So that was somewhat the period before Russia's increased attacks on Ukraine started in 2022. So basically, in case of the Baltic states, again, we always recognized, we always understood that we're going to be the buffer zone. We're going to be buffer zone for Germany. We're going to be buffer zone for Sweden. We're going to be buffer zone for the Western countries, because that's the geopolitical enlargement logic, right? We're trying to get better neighbors, safer neighbors, more reliable neighbors, trustworthy neighbors, peaceful neighbors, happy and cooperative neighbors living next to us. And that has been our logic, and it still is, in relation with Ukraine, with Georgia, with Moldova in particular. Western Balkans a bit too far from us, but I'm going to get to that point in a bit later. But this is still, in our understanding, well, we need to have friendly countries next to us. And this is somewhat an unwritten criteria that every society, every country which is joining the European Union have to understand, that this is one of the criteria. You'll have to be a buffer zone. We understand that we are a buffer zone at the moment. We understand it very well. We don't have to be reminded it. We knew it since the very beginning, but we still decided that, yeah, well, it's better to be part of the organization, part of the society, part of the community, which we want to be part of, rather than align with somebody who is telling us what to think, how to think, where to be, what to do, and at what point to do what. So in this case, it's our opinion. Usually Russia never asks for opinion of the countries that it is trying to friend with, but in this case, this is the reality. And so again, as dramatic as this sounds, but this is the unfortunate new reality of the EU enlargement, that in the 90s, when Russia was weak, when Yeltsin had good relations with Clinton, when Putin had some more or less good relations with George W. Bush in the beginning, our accession, when the whole world was fighting Al-Qaeda and terrorism, that was the momentum when EU's enlargements were seen as a possibility to solve the gray zones and gray areas and integrate the countries, in those willing countries, to integrate them into the European Union and embrace them. So normative power Europe at its peak. But now the situation is obviously quite different. The European Union is no longer seen as an economic organization, as a soft power, as a softie, if I may ridicule a little bit a term, and but it is seen as a geopolitical rival, apparently, and it is increasing. We see currently the geopolitical battle taking place in Georgia. We see it also in Moldova, and of course we see it absolutely in Ukraine, also partially in Serbia and in other Western Balkan countries. Final element is that I think that the positive one, because I have to say something positive, right? But we have to always keep in mind, and this is on part of those countries which are part of the European Union already. European Union is still hope for many societies in the world. It's not only and solely about the geopolitical rationalization. It's not about dealing with politicians and decision makers. It has never been. It is about the hearts and minds of the societies. And the European dream, live in peace, with prosperity, with clear understanding what life can be, that the wealth can be achieved by just regular work. It's still the dream in so many societies all around the world, not only inside the European Union. Therefore, European Union is seen as, those who came here thinking that I should have went to the migration panel instead of this one, here comes a little bit of a point which in this case maybe is gonna make you feel a bit better that you are still here, because it's going to be encompassing migration issue as well. We see the migration issue. We see so many societies, not only from the candidate countries who are trying to get into the European Union. They know their countries will never get into the European Union, being those countries in Africa, in Middle East, in Latin America, all around the world. But there's still this European narrative still works. We sometimes think that now, well, Russia is taking over, China is taking over, because they're good for dictators. Yes, they're good for dictators. They don't ask questions. They don't ask for human rights and please don't kill each other. Please don't torture each other. They're just, yeah, we do business. We do geopolitics. So dictators love it, absolutely. But their societies want to be living in the European dream, right? And that is a major thing that I think sometimes when sitting inside the European Union and thinking about the rest of the world, we're forgetting our appeal, our sexiness, right? And we have to embrace this. We have to actually keep in mind that we are interesting still. And Europe. And then, yeah, I see 1 minute. Yes. Okay. Fine. Good.
Thank you, Karlis, for highlighting also the external actors, the relevance for the enlargement policy, but also then some ending on a more positive note. And the positive note also is that Yuri is back. So Yuri, welcome, and thank you for rejoining us on this panel. So if you could also elaborate a bit on the opportunities and challenges for the enlargement policy.
Thank you, Fulda. Dear colleagues, it's a pleasure for me to be here, to have this possibility to share our opinion from Ukrainian point of view. I'm apologize for this just disappearance from here, but it was by ballistic attack over Ukraine. We have 2 missiles flying over Kiev this time. Unfortunately, it's realities of our life, so I apologize beforehand if I will be missing next time on this occasion, but I hope that I will have this possibility to say completely what I would like to say. Dear colleagues, the topic of our session has a broad civilizational context and meaning. With EU enlargement policy, on one hand, it's a philosophy and ideology of its future geopolitical existence. And on the other hand, it's a tool for countering hybrid external influences and threats that are intensifying and becoming more and more aggressive. In general, 2 components of the enlargement policy can be distinguished. First of all, in regional context, the integration, enlargement, expansion of Brussels is a proven means of preserving the zone of stability in the country. And this is of particular importance against the background of the wave of hybrid pressure. I mean, first of all, Russian intervention in Europe, and we are talking about forceful testing of EU borders, inciting migration crisis, provocation military facilities, bribing politicians and deputies, expanded information operations, massive cyber attacks, in particular in the Czech Republic, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, Great Britain, despite not a member of EU, but in Europe, and etc. The results of the elections, European Parliament showed a noticeable strengthening of the position of right-wing forces, Eurosceptics, nationalist movements, etc. What forms and content will the compromise between the groups of the Parliament have? What will be the political configuration of the European Commission? How will this affect further enlargement? There are still open questions. But it is absolutely obvious that there is no alternative to the further enlargement of the EU. Because in the current reality, the unity of Europe is the only guarantee of its development. And in this case, I absolutely agree that Brussels can leave Ukraine, Moldova, and the Balkan countries in the zone of influence of the aggressor country, as well as Georgia. Because the current situation there is just a temporary revenge of the Russian world, but this is a threat and challenge to stability on the European continent. And the same process now we can imagine in Moldova during the presidential elections. Another component of enlargement is geopolitical. As we see it now, the polarization of the world community is intensifying, and a new round of escalation of confrontation between democracy and authoritarianism is being observed. A strategic axis is being formed between Moscow, Beijing, Pyongyang, and Tehran. The best illustration of this is a sharp and large-scale struggle between the democratic world and the camp of authoritarian states on the eve of the peace summit about Ukraine. This is a struggle for the votes of countries of Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, and the Asia-Pacific region. Does this concern the external interest of the EU? Obviously, yes. Taking this opportunity, I would like to draw your attention also to the important and weight of this summit, which should open the prospects for achieving a just and stable peace for Ukraine. Dear colleagues, EU enlargement policy has, without exaggeration, the highest level of priority for Ukraine. And in my opinion, it is due at least 3 fundamental factors. First of all, the very fact of opening negotiations and joining the EU is an important, powerful moral and psychological stimulus and additional motivation for Ukrainian society, especially under conditions of war. Figuratively speaking, this is a materialization of the European dream for which Ukraine is fighting. And now I must say that more and more Ukrainians feel themselves as being Europeans by their identity. And those figures, according to our polls, has grown dramatically since the beginning of 2000. Now, for the beginning of this year, 84% of Ukrainians support the Ukrainian accession. Secondly, the scale and irreversibility of Ukrainian pro-European transformations give reasons to claim for the beginning of the negotiations between Kyiv and Brussels about accession and approval of the framework of negotiation. And these negotiations fully correspond to both the current level of partnership and the geopolitical and security importance of Ukraine for the future of Europe. It also has been mentioned. And the next point, the negotiation regime provides for a new pragmatic format for the implementation of reforms in Ukraine, the need for which is urgent even in wartime. Moreover, we are seeing this opportunity for renewal and restoration of Ukraine after the war, as also as a possibility for its modernization and preparation to the accession to the EU and going towards these standards of the EU. So it's a very, very closely linked process of rebuilding and the modernization. And here I would like to turn to the point of link between geopolitical and merit-based process. If with geopolitical, it's more or less clear because Ukraine, in fact, defends the eastern flank of the EU in a military sense. And then in a merit-based process, I must say about the reforms that have been done already recently in Ukraine, with the process of matching the criteria of starting the negotiations. Such a screening sessions were held on the adaptation of Ukrainian legislation to the norms and regulations of the European Union. A lot of things has changed in anti-corruption judiciary system in Ukraine. Was just recent. A package of integration laws on labor relations, changes in legislation in other areas in accordance with the EU norms has been adopted. In turn, official Brussels also made some steps towards Ukraine, like extensions of the trade visa regime and publishing a report of Kyiv's successful implementation of additional reforms and so on and so forth. So now we are hope very much that the negotiation process will start and the framework for negotiations has been adopted. We do hope that all countries of the European Union will support this decision, and it will come in due time. Dear colleagues, again speaking about the enlargement policy, I'd like to point out two important moments. The first one is that gradual integration of new members, even before entry, is very, very important. And the component of this process should be institutional and legal integration of candidates into the common European and cultural space. In the conditions of hybrid confrontation with an alliance of authoritarian states, this is especially relevant. And the second important point is the deepening of partnership with candidate countries in the field of European security policy, including with the framework of the priorities defined in the strategic compass. So this second component, security component, is becoming more and more important. And I think we even may say that one of new security criteria should be added to the Copenhagen criteria: determination and ability to resist external aggression, making a significant contribution to the common security and defense of the European Union. So it's what I would like to say now for this moment. I'd like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Yuri, for sharing both already your insights on the challenges and opportunities, highlighting again, well, the importance of the interference of external actors, and here, of course, mostly Russia, but also then elaborating on the state of the reforms in Ukraine. And then at the end, even kind of already touching upon the second aspect of this panel, so how to go about where to put the emphasis on with regards to gradual integration, and then also the security policy aspect. So I would like to turn this second question also to give that in the second round back to the panel, because we have now heard a lot of, well, maybe more about the challenges than opportunities, so to speak. But the opportunity and the benefit of economic integration, at the same time the challenge related to that, in order how new accession candidates can catch up. We also discussed, external or unprecedented or not foreseen incidents like the COVID pandemic, how that can actually also affect both on the economics, on the societies, and with that also on the enlargement policy. We extensively discussed, the external actors' influence, well, both in security terms, but also what is happening now in Georgia is also part of course, external influence. And then also the question of how is the reform process in the accession candidate countries. And then what Danijela also mentioned, I really like the reference to, EU member states rather cautious, not yet, but in the near future, the enlargement. And then the expectation by the accession candidates almost yesterday. But I think this is really, that's the question of expectation management, because accession procedures simply take time. I mean, and coming from the Western Balkans, you have lived through this process, but also, and we have not talked about the question of Turkey at the moment, because I think that is the example where an accession process has really kind of undermined itself and has really gotten frozen and got stuck with regards to the procedure. So how to square the circle? So if you now would say, what are 2 points where you would basically start in order to have more dynamism and also action in the enlargement policy. So Anna, back to you.
When it comes to the Western Balkans, I always feel a bit troubled, because obviously there are political issues to deal with, and also the merit-based approach, which is it's unnecessary to say that it's very important to get prepared for the membership. Otherwise, the countries won't be able to take benefit from it. But I have the impression that in the Western Balkans, maybe to some extent with the exception of Montenegro, we reached a point where the cost of the negative responses from the EU is much higher than the positive impact of the positive answers. So it's a bit a tricky situation how to justify sometimes decisions within the European Union when it comes to the Western Balkans, because obviously we can see that there are leaders in the region who are ready to take nationalistic rhetoric if they don't feel that they get enough political support from the EU. And let's be honest also with ourselves within the EU, that there were some situations that or there were some momentums that the EU did not grab in the most recent past, namely also the Prespa agreement. When it was signed, it was not too much appreciated by the EU. There was no really positive signs from the Council. The start of the accession talks with Albania and North Macedonia was postponed various times, and this is a quite discouraging message, also for the leaders who might need to deal with very sensitive political issues, and which are not properly understood in some EU member states. So for some, changing the name of the country might not be a big deal. I don't think that it's such that would be an easy issue in any of the member states, actually. But really in North Macedonia, that was the case. And if we remind ourselves how the referendum question was articulated in North Macedonia, it was really like, we need to change the name to have EU membership. And basically that was the reason why people voted for, although there was a very low presence, which also expressed that people did not like the situation, but that was the case. So, if we have a look on Bosnia and Herzegovina, there was some occasions when really we could, and actually it was this time as well, that there were the real possibility to get further in the accession process can create some political momentum to bring together those political actors who otherwise like fighting in their domestic political spheres. And unfortunately, it's and it's also an issue which is related to the time frame and how to deal with that. That if the process is too long, then it's really it's lose the mobilizing power of the EU accession and the message of coming from the EU. And yeah, you can lose lots of votes if you say that you want encourage EU accession, but with saying that you are on the side of EU accession, it won't bring too much vote. And yeah, so that's so for this it's I do think that's a very big question of the geostrategic and merit-based approach. And one issue we heard about gradual integration, and I do think it can be helpful for many of the countries, but still, my impression is that there is some cautiousness from the side of the governments what it will mean for the future, especially for Montenegro, which is in the very last phase. I mean, obviously, they do not want to get into another procedure that might hinder or slow down even further their EU accession process. So this one-size-fits-all approach might need to be considered, but I do think that could have a benefit for the region, which is in a big struggle to get closer to the European Union.
Thank you, because that was also my question to Danijela then, with regards to gradual integration, staged accession, all this differentiation. Would that be something from your perspective that would actually facilitate and help the process?
Well, I guess I'm here in charge for optimism. I'm coming from Western Balkans, from Montenegro, as you have heard. So I would just like to say a few sentences, information about Montenegro, that we has got our independence 2006, that we have open negotiation in 2012. Up to now, we are in the process of negotiation for 11 years. So it is so far the longest negotiation period ever. I will just want to share with you, maybe you don't know about technicalities, but June is super positive month for Montenegro and for the process of enlargement, because since we are in process of enlargement 11 years, it means that we have done something. And Montenegro is a small place with 600,000 people. Our economic model is simple. We don't have so many things to negotiate in many economic chapters. Of course, political we have to do, but from 2011, no, from 2018, actually, our process of negotiation was blocked. Then, you know, this new methodology to 2020 introduce more calculus to rule of law and fight of corruption. We call it, maybe it's not familiar for you, but for us, it's every word. We get up from the bed and we go to the bed with chapters 23 and 24 and discussion how to deal with that. And then finally, you couldn't believe, but we did it. And because with this new methodology, we have to get positive European Commission report that we did everything for now, temporary, in the chapters 23, 24, to be able to closing chapters. So during 11 years of negotiation, we opened all chapters, we closed 3. So at the beginning of the month, we got positive, we call it IBAR. IBAR is everywhere in Montenegro's news, minds, rumors, and so on. And we are expecting at the end of June that the European Council will adopt that green light, and that probably by the end of the year, we could actually close, we believe, we hope, dozen. And there is speculation from 5 to 10. So as I said, from economic part, we have done a lot because there is not so many problematic areas. Of course, there will be chapter competition and ecology that will take the time. So since we are finally good student regarding rule of law, at least for provisionally benchmarks, of course, after political change in from 2020, we had few governments, but nevertheless, they worked hard. So we introduced or adopted many laws, but from now we have to implement them to be really good students to, oh yes, I'm talking about the rule of law. I should Montenegro, I should have more time. So right now we have to implement rule of law. We have to make our institutions strong to fight for the corruption. And what to say, I really believe that all these zigzags in enlargement history will finally push us forward to full membership. Don't kill me.
Thank you, Danijela, for kind of sharing the insights from the Montenegro process. Karlis, do you think that, you know, a fast accession now, as you know, a small accession with Montenegro would actually kind of benefit the entire enlargement policy process, or do you think that we should rather have the next Big Bang enlargement? So, what is your perceptions on how to go about?
Thank you. No, sure. Next enlargement as soon as possible with the countries who are fulfilling the criteria. That's a positive message, but that kind of goes into the. Well, Funda has heard this one before. Accounting, this is the third time Funda is going to be hearing me raising the suggestion of the final enlargement. So let's bring the sport back. The idea is let's bring the sport back. So Montenegro joining in 2 years from now. Perfect, exactly. Let's play. And that's the attitude. That's the attitude that was with the previous Big Bang enlargement, the idea that even the Baltic states, we were struggling, we were fighting each other. Who's going to be the best? Who's going to be the best pupil in the classroom? Of course, we always had Hungary or Slovenia, especially, whom we were looking up to. Yeah, well, we're doing always better. Estonians, yes, always claiming they're doing better. But at the end, Latvians managed still to, you know, close more chapters before Estonians did. And that's kind of, it should be. This is the bringing back the life juice into the process. It's not only a technical bureaucratic issue. It should be a clear political competition. Why not? Why not? It's not like during the enlargement process, the countries which are trying to access the European Union are trying to drag each other down. That hasn't happened before, at least I don't know. Maybe somebody else knows the cases, but this is a process because everybody is a winner at the end. The participation prize at the end is the membership in the European Union, and that is a major thing. So I would say, let's say 2032. It would be exactly 80 years since the establishment of the European Coal and Steel Community. So let's have the final enlargement in 2032. Why I'm arguing for this? Because, of course, there maybe longer transition periods after membership for countries like Ukraine who are currently at war. We have to recognize the challenges that they're going through, of course. But the fact is that having twinning, having more accelerated engagement and socializing of the Western Balkan countries, of Moldova, of Georgia, of course, of Ukraine. This is important. That usually is helping. It's about engaging, and maybe in this case again, the Baltic states, Finland, Poland, who have no much of the historical ties to the Western Balkan countries, could be coming in and listening in and explaining, because there is no historical animosities, right? With
Yes.
Poland, I wasn't fully sure, but maybe because sometimes in Latvia, we discovered that with Danes, we used to have a bit of a problem, which not in the history books. It's not even in history book. So familiarizing also with the future partners from our perspective is so important to embrace it. And I have been saying this already to the Latvian audience. You heard this, because we're like, yeah, Georgia, yes, Moldova, yes, Ukraine, yes, Western Balkans, yeah, well, it's up to somebody else, right? But in the Baltic states, we actually have to also get a little bit more familiar with the Western Balkan partners and future partners in the European Union, because sometimes it feels like it's somewhat a comparison. You had it bad, but we had it worse, right? But that's not the way how to approach this. This is a rather gloomy perspective. That does not benefit anybody. Enlargement is happening because you are who you are. You are fulfilling the criteria. You are a reliable, trustworthy, like-minded, geopolitically aligned partner. Not because you had one thing worse than the other one. It's not a competition who had it worse. I'm sorry for this, but therefore again, this sporty attitude towards, okay, let's close the chapters as quickly as we can, as qualitative as we can. And of course, the quality wise, we don't have to be striving for 5-star achievements. 4 stars are perfectly fine, right? Because again, many of our countries joined in, and again, we are in Hungary, and we know that, and then Poland was the case, and of course the Baltic states occasionally have been also a bit of on the issue with the rule of law and human rights questions and everything else. But that's somewhat part of the completion of the transition. It happens after the membership, not necessarily, but actually having the chapters closed and fulfilling the criteria at its best, at its most, is actually important. Another final factor, I think 2032 and final enlargement could reinvigorate even Turkey. And not only Turkey, but even those countries in which leadership will finally understand that the weight of the decision that we either make it or break it is on them. Not that, okay, we're going to keep doing whatever we know. The next elite of politicians, when they come, when we are done, then they can go and integrate into the European Union. No. It's on you. You make the decision now not to integrate. So that stays on you. It's not on future. It's on you. It's on your shoulders. And that should be the message which, in this case, this could facilitate as well. Maybe Norway should be given the third chance to vote yes. Why I'm saying this? It's also battling the fatigue in the European Union. We already know, according to the Eurobarometer data, 50-50. 50% of the European Union population supports enlargement. 50% are not sure about it. There's a fatigue. Enlargement fatigue has been an issue before. How did, out of all people, Jean-Claude Juncker deal with it? He said no new enlargement until 2025. And that actually gave a perspective for many people. Okay, no new enlargement, good. So countries can prepare, they can do whatever is necessary.
Deal with Chinese.
Stagnate if necessary, if they want to. And at the end, let's give a new beacon. Let's give a new deadline. Let's bring the sport back. Now I'm done.
Okay, I think this idea of really, the fixed state also has an EU internal implication. So that I think that we might need to discuss, and I would be curious also to hear what Pernille thinks about the third vote in Norway. Yuri, did you have anything to add with regards to how to go about? You had the gradual integration and the security aspect. if you have anything to add, just 2 sentences, and I would open the floor then to the audience.
Yeah, if you let me, I'd like to mention some points that maybe are interesting from our own Ukrainian perspective. Because if you look to our situation, our geographic situation and historic situation, Ukraine just have no other choice. We have no options for integration, despite one, European integration. As you know, Ukraine has passed a long and winding road before staying on the part of European integration. We choose between 2 options, Eurasian and European. And finally, because we were between 2 powerful poles of gravitation. On one side, it's European Union, on the other side, it's Russia. But since 2014, in fact, one option has become impossible for us. And from 2022, it was complete breakdown. We have no other options, and for us, it's a matter of existential choice, really existential choice, because if we want to protect our identity as nation and state, we have to integrate into Europe and be a part of Europe. And from this point of view, we prized highly the enlargement of the EU, that including countries of Western Balkans, because the more united Europe is becoming, it's the better for Ukraine. If Europe will be united and integrated in every sense, in social, economical, political, security, it's beneficial for Ukraine as well. And if Ukraine will become one time full member of the European Union, in fact, that we may say that our country, our people are secure from that. I'm not saying here about the integration into NATO, because now it's a very disputable issue on the condition of war as well as European integration. But for us, it's just close the circle. We made our choice already. We are going step by step till this goal. And I think that finally we'll get it, we'll become a member of the European Union, and it will be profitable for us and the European Union. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuri. Now we've heard a lot of, broad aspects across the entire spectrum of the future of the EU's enlargement policy. So I invite now the floor to kind of pinpoint at individual aspects that we can deepen in the discussion. So Frauke, yeah, let's...
Thank you for this very interesting discussion. My name is Frauke Sebers. I'm with the German Council on Foreign Relations in Berlin. And I would like to kind of challenge 2 of the basic assumptions that we have in this discussion, at least since 2022, probably longer. The first one, okay, this is actually since 2022, this idea of the new momentum. And I would argue that we have kind of a seed for a new momentum that was planted by the application of Ukraine and Moldova and the consequent kind of enthusiasm or re-enthusiasm for enlargement. And we've seen this plant kind of sprouting certain new arms, including in the discussion of reform and enlargement, and certain political moves that came behind it. But I don't think that this momentum is already in full bloom. So I think a lot more is needed to make this momentum happen. And this also brings me to the second challenge, which was also mentioned by all of you, that the geopolitical imperative is actually challenging the merit-based approach. Because I don't think we are there yet either, because if we look at the example of Montenegro, so Montenegro is talking the talk, walking the walk. We've seen it. You have the ICG coming up. Congratulations on the EBA, on the positive EBA report. But there is no way that this can, at this point, be the lighthouse effect that it is intended to be, because the countries coming after, if we're looking at it right now, would be Albania and North Macedonia, who are both blocked for political reason by member states. And so even if there was a willingness by the leaderships, which we see, I don't know, I think partly, they can still use the EU as a scapegoat at this point, and they would be right to a certain extent, because of course these 2 blockages are not connected to the Copenhagen criteria, to the EU acquis. They're completely outside of this. So I think this merit-based approach, it has to come from 2 sides. And I would also very much support this last argument that we need timelines. I don't think we need these, because there's always this, especially where I come from in Germany, it's the politicians are always, we don't want fixed timelines, we don't want big bang enlargements again. But I think we need roadmaps and we need timelines. And then my last point, I think from the Western Balkans perspective, at least, we have these new growth plans, which have fixed timelines, which have fixed momentums. So this hopefully can develop into a kind of a pilot, basically, and then coming to the next, to the new MFF after 2027 negotiations, I think, are starting next year. We can then make it happen so that we actually have a staged accession and feasible timelines, tangible momentums. I would be curious what you think about this. Sorry for being long.
Thank you. There was already various aspects that we can go into, but I'm going to collect anyways. So, okay, so many questions. I think Pernille was first here, and then, if you have the mic, you can, just go ahead, and then we're going to switch to Pernille.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jana from Istanbul Policy Center from Turkey. My question is, now that we are not only talking enlargement, but geostrategic enlargement, and there need to update the Copenhagen criteria. So I would like to hear your input on this. And one personal remark coming from Turkey, I was a little bit upset not talking about Turkey during the enlargement panels that we had. So hearing Turkey in this enlargement panel makes me happy, because I witnessed how the positive atmosphere changed the policies, adaptation, how it gave give power for civil society in Turkey during the times of Turkey's accession. So this is my personal.
So I'm passing to Pernille, and then I think I'm going to give it back to the floor, but I have the other.
Thank you so much, Pernille Rike from the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs. I will not say so much about Norway, because Norway is a very special case. I mean, we fulfill all the criteria, but have the internal political situation that this is not something that is discussed at all. With the government, one of the parties in the government not willing to having that as its main kind of political agenda, not to avoid Norway being member of the EU. But something could happen, but not with this government, at least. So we will wait and see. No referendum in the kind of near future, at least, unfortunately. But I wanted to go back to some of the things that you raised. I mean, the enlargement is now back on the agenda. It's in real momentum, and it's due to security mainly. And it's clear that this is about creating, I mean, I like this kind of unwritten criteria that is creating a buffer zone, because that is the case. But at the same time, something that is increasingly important, as democracies are threatened all over the world, including in Europe, in the EU, it's also about ensuring democratic resilience, that kind of not only in the EU, but also the future members. So my question is just how to do that in the best way. Of course, the EU has all these criteria on democratic resilience, rule of law, media freedom, all these kind of things. But I just wonder if the approach that the EU has had so far is the right one. It has been criticized for being too technocratic and so on. And on the other side, somebody said that it's more the responsibility of the countries to adjust and so on. But I think maybe it's a lot of money kind of pouring into this system, this enlargement process. So how, and I would like to hear from some of the countries that are candidates. So if you could suggest, so have some suggestion on how to improve this process from the EU side, on how to engage with the candidate countries. I mean, I'm the coordinator of a Horizon project where we try to look at exactly that. We are in the beginning, so that's why I'm really interested in hearing your view, and perhaps others in the audience that comes from the candidate countries. Just coming from Tirana, from Albania. Albania is one of the countries that are perhaps one of the first that will be members of the candidate countries, maybe. It scores quite well on the criteria, I mean, technically. but there is a huge problem with corruption. It's a huge problem with a lot of issues. And how can, and these are things that is not, I mean, you have that in the EU as well. So I mean, this is something that is not easy to handle. And of course, we should not go for 5 stars. We can go for 4 stars or even 3 stars. I agree, because something happened when you become members. We can also go the other way, we know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are some things that we need to, I think have to be more concrete. Talking about rule of law, corruption, all these criteria is fine, but we know that there is state capture. We know that things can look good on paper, and then it's not so good. So what can we do to be more kind of go into the real problem? My suggestion from what I've seen in the project that we are working on now is that we have to go deep into understand the different candidate countries, the history, why it, and it's very different. Albania is very different from Montenegro. Western Balkans is have different experiences as well. And of course, Eastern Europe and Ukraine has a completely different situation. So I just wonder, it would be good to hear from the different candidates, also from the panel, but also from if somebody in the audience has some suggestions. We're glad to hear.
Thank you, Pernille, for also kind of raising the aspect of the need to understand accession candidate countries. I just changed strategies because I'm not going to give it now back to the panel immediately because there are other questions in the room. So I'm going to go for the Michael approach that he did yesterday. So first collecting all the questions and then giving the opportunity to the panel to pick and choose which aspects actually you would like to touch upon. I think that might not explode our timeline then. So Başak, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Başak, for the interesting panel. This was especially evident in Karlis' intervention. I mean, we kind of seem to have a dichotomy between enlargement on one hand, where we have all those noble values, rule of law and stuff, and on the other we have transactionalism, business as usual, where the EU is kind of doing business with the third parties. But I was just wondering if really so, the EU refugee deal that the EU signed with Turkey, and now with the EU's geopolitical awakening and the blurring of the line between enlargement policy and neighborhood policy, I mean, can we possibly have an enlargement policy which is completely devoid of transactionalism? So, I mean, do we really have this bifurcation between transactionalism and enlargement? And I second the previous comment. I mean, it's a bit academically uninspiring to see that Turkey is kind of the T word in the enlargement policy. I mean, especially in this panel here in TEPSA, but the panel was very inspiring anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Başak. I think there was a question back there, yeah, in the corner over there. So, and
the University of Ljubljana, so I have to advocate the Western Balkans success to the European Union. But my personal perspective is that we are having a strong problem in the Western Balkans if we are granting them the possibility to access the European Union as soon as possible. If we are in the merit and to Western Balkans, but if the geopolitics, we have Albania said that, okay, according to the Western Balkan Union, we have to have a war. Some problems are starting in Bosnia and Herzegovina now with the Dodik annunciation of the separation of the Republika Srpska. So my question is that whether the European Union is aware that this is not anymore, we are not anymore in the 90s or in the 2000s when there was no competition in the Western Balkans or maybe in Central Europe. There was just the European Union, the only possible, how to say, harbor or whatever. And now we are having China there, we are having Turkey there, we are having United States there, we are having, I don't know, Iran there, we are having Russia there. So there are more especially for to reschedule our mindset towards maybe a more geopolitical stance for the enlargement than focus on, I don't know, all recipes of the merit-based criteria.
Thank you. Also, again, a question on the question of how to go about with a merit-based approach. There was a question here in the front. Can you, yeah, thank you for carrying the microphone.
Thank you very much. My name is Miklos Dira. I'm a foreign policy analyst and the former Secretary General of the Hungarian Atlantic Council. I have two short remarks. The first, that there are clear contradictory purposes, aims, or endeavors in the EU enlargement goals. Namely, there is a security element in it, and there is a kind of ideological making Europe whole and free and to assemble the democratic state of Europe for a bright future. So these are rather contradictory in that time, because the first is to stave off Russia and China, maybe Turkey, and the enlargement from the European arena. And the second requires some kind of eligibility, which are not how do you say, well nurtured in these countries. My second remark is that there are at least three different regions in connection with the enlargement. And the three regions, the Western Balkans, Ukraine, and maybe Moldova, and probably the Caucasus, require different approaches, totally different approaches. And the security element and the making Europe whole and free, and the economic element in this European purposes are sometimes contradictory in these countries as well.
Thank you. More comments than questions. And I'm going to get, that's the final question over there. And then we need to go back to the panel.
Hello, my name is Cordelia Buchanan-Ponczak. I'm with the Finnish Institute of International Affairs, but I also have spent a lot of time in Poland and Georgia. So I'm going to make a quick comment and then a question. On Poland, I'm just going to push back against this kind of merits versus politics and say that we can see some of the effects on the way that the acquis is implemented, and then how this goes through the national system, and then the effects down the road when these begin to erode. So this would be a warning as we are going into any other country of what can happen because of sort of pushing through too quickly at the sort of in-name only level of reform. But then my question is about actually Georgia, it's not just applying to Georgia, but it's particularly pertinent in Georgia right now with, of course, the passage of the law, and this differing between the government level and then the local population level, because I think especially in Georgia, we can see where Georgian population is still very focused on joining the European Union, and we're seeing that as a separation from what the Georgian government is implementing in their policy right now. And this isn't the only place where this is happening. So my question to the panel would be, how to go about maybe making a holistic policy approach that appeals to both the local population and the government, and then accounting for any discrepancy between the two. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very broad set of questions. I think some of the questions actually interrelated, because there was lots of aspects of with regards how to manage the so-called merit-based approach. It is important, we all agree. It can have effects like the like was just said in terms of once you're a member, but then it's also kind of blocking itself with regards to bilateral blockages. That's particularly with regards to Albania and North Macedonia. So that's the entire question of merit-based approach versus also the geopolitical push. I really like the metaphor and the picture of how we can actually keep the plant blooming in terms of keeping the momentum. But it's also the question then of the growth plans, the money, whether how that actually benefits the region, the understanding of accession candidate countries, and how to actually concretely then and individually interact with them and help them. The question of a package deal in all that issue. And then, of course, also I think with the refinement of the Copenhagen criteria, maybe also with regards to more to the security aspects and foreign policy aspects, because as you see right now, the most important thing that you look for in the accession or the country reports is actually the alignment with CFSP acquis. So that has become a very crucial aspect of the accession process. And then also the question of transactionalism and enlargement policy. So it's all related between the geopolitical push and the merit-based approach. So I'm going to give each of you 3 minutes to answer these questions, or maybe 4. Really pick and choose from this broad set, which I think there were interlinkages. And also, I think the last question with regards to the government level and population, I think this is really also something to deal with if the population is really pro-European and the government goes into the opposite direction. How can we deal with that?
I'm really sorry, but I won't be able to really comment on Turkey or Georgia as such. So it's not really my field of expertise, and I don't think that it would be good from my side to do so. But when it comes to like society pro-EU and the government working toward another direction, I do think what is a very positive development in the enlargement policy is how the role of civil society is growing in the process, and it pretty much visible also in the Western Balkans. So I do think it's an important development. It was also this merit-based geostrategic dilemma or geopolitical dilemma. I do think that when it comes to merit-based approach, it's extremely important to increase the credibility of the merit-based approach. So if a country, and I mean, let's also talk about Kosovo. I mean, when we are talking about visa liberalization and how the number of conditions were increasing and how they suffered to get visa liberalization, then we can see that no. I mean, and it's also a kind of reference back to what Karlis said, that yeah, it's also about, okay, doing your job. But even if you do your job and you won't get the right answer and you won't get the recognition of the achievements, then obviously the motivation will be less, or there will be, and then it's a kind of we also talk about the political issues and the bilateral disputes which block the advancement of some countries' progress in the EU accession process. I mean, it's also a very it really undermines the credibility of the merit-based approach. So that's I do think it's a very important aspect that the EU has to deal with in order to increase the credibility of the merit-based approach and makes it really work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I don't know, can I be short? But I would say that in Montenegro in recent years, we really discuss very much, should it be regional approach or should be one country by another? We have had several initiatives. What to say, as I said, from perspective of Montenegro right now, when we are talking about enlargement, it is mostly Anglo-Saxon story that, I don't know, Anglo community really put a lot of pressure on the EU to move forward in the towards European Union. So it was very clearly said after we got Ibar, American ambassador said, congratulations, I hope you will vote for next parliamentary elections, while chief of the EU delegation said, if you work hard, if it is merit-based, maybe, probably. So we already said that candidate countries have to die to join the EU. So there is a constant pain in all what you said, but you also have to know that that patient is the worst patient. So for Montenegro, we do like all these growth initiatives, but from our perspective, it is all that that EU or whoever pushes in the region. Just to mention that that Americans were very, very strong to put in place open Balkan, like regional integration, but it didn't work. So I'm not quite sure that Montenegro will join and support, but a growth plan is also doing very, very slowly, and also growth plan brings real physical infrastructure. We have to have in mind that with geopolitics change the perspective, that now for the regional growth perspective, it is much more important and influential in energy and digital infrastructure. So Europe has to have that in mind to change IPA and everything. Pernilla, thank you very much for giving me that direct question, that you believe in me, that I could give it answer, but just right now, but just to answer you, typically economic penny for my thoughts. Include me if you want a Montenegrin perspective, include me in your next project. What to say, and to my nice Slovenian colleague, 5-star enlargement project. Yes, you have to have in mind that situation politically is complicated, it's fragile, and he mentioned war. Just let's be sexy, as you said, make enlargement, don't war. That's my message.
Thank you, Danijela. Karlis, anything to add to that?
Well, I hope, yes, but basically, no, colleagues already covered everything, and thank you for so many wonderful questions. Again, I think the biggest one is about the merit-based approach geopolitics. Well, my intention was not to say that those are mutually exclusive things. I was trying to say that it's actually an unwritten Copenhagen criteria. Geopolitical allegiances, geopolitical understanding of countries' role as a buffer zone and as a first defense line against whatever comes is in this case part of the accession process. There is no way around it. It's not a transactionalism. It's just a reality that countries not only in northern Eastern Europe or Eastern Europe or Central Eastern Europe or Southern Europe are experiencing everywhere. It's exactly the same story, exactly the same situation. Italy Greece definitely are on the front lines with the migration issues, and we understand that they are the buffer zone in this situation. So yeah, that's how it is. You join the club and you become part of the family, and you have your duties in the family. But on the merit-based approach, no way merit-based approach should be abandoned. In 1990, in the Maastricht Treaty, it was put in for a simple reason that in this case, we cannot make the geopolitical decision. So if countries fulfill the criteria, then they are accessing the European Union. That logic is still there. It's a matter of fairness. Because try to explain me at the moment and why, for instance, I don't know, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine should be given a fast track approach when Montenegro is fulfilling all the criteria. Is that fair? That's a basic question. And in Latvia, we are for Ukraine, absolutely. But if you ask the population, do they want fast track approach for Ukraine in the European Union membership? No, why? Right? Because there's a question of fairness. We did that. Everybody else who has been enlarging, joining in the process, have been going through the adjustments. That's part of the process. So no geopolitical decision alone should suffice. That's the first thing. On Albania, and very quickly, again, I believe that not only believe, this is quite evidential, that after the EU accession, there's always the question of post-accession conditionality, but it's also a post-accession transformation, which still goes on. In our case, it took 7 more years for the de-oligarchization. We have the 3 infamous oligarchs, which we had to deal with. One is quasi in prison, one is in the parliament, and one is lurking in the shadows at the moment. but it doesn't change the fact that it was the solution of the parliament and many other processes which took place. So fighting corruption, it's a lengthy process, it's a constant process. So, but it should not be a reason to prevent countries from if they're fulfilling the rest of the criteria, at least 4 stars, then in that case their accession. The only thing final, yeah, I see 1 minute. final one, what the European Union should change in its behavior. And we spoke this with Jim Close. I don't know if Jim is still somewhere here. It's very often, especially in the enlargement process, that the European Union officials, the countries, the existing member states have this approach of talking down to the countries who are accessing. It's talking to, and therefore I was suggesting that maybe the Baltic states and Poland and Finland should step in the Western Balkan and actually have the conversation, which would be talking to, not talking down to, right? Because eventually countries join in, and then there can be a backlash. And we see that, we saw that in Poland, this backlash. We see it in Hungary, that backlash. It's a different story. It's a longer discussion that I'm now opening up. But this is somewhat a backlash of the 90s and then being talked down to, asymmetric integration, using Jacimovic words. Thank you.
Thank you, Karlis. Yuri, your thoughts on the very broad set of questions.
Yes, thank you. Very shortly, some of questions. First one, about timelines. It should not last too long. How much is too long? It's not defined. But otherwise, we should have discouraging of people and disappointment. I must say now that the half of Ukrainians can wait no more than 5 years. Probably it's an exaggeration, but anyway, now the level of expectation is very high. Second, about composition of merit-based and geopolitical approaches. I completely agree with Karlis because those both things should go together. Because despite any geopolitical calculation and profits, just you should do your homework, as Ukraine is doing now. Under conditions of war, still reforming, changing, fighting corruption, reforming judiciary system, and so on and so forth. So it's inevitable parts of the process. The third one is very important in case of Georgia. Then we have this discrepancy between governmental policy and expectations of society. We have the same in 2013-2014 when we had Euromaidan and Revolution. For this situation, the recommendation is that the EU should engage both with government and civil society. And probably questions of technical assistance also should be more linked, not with governmental institutions, but with civil society. It's then it makes a more solid background of society for supporting European integration. Maybe I stopped here. Thank you.
Thank you, Yuri, and thank you to the entire panel for having shared your expertise, your thoughts with us on the very broad set of questions. Yuri, once again, thank you for joining us online under these circumstances. It's very much appreciated. So, and hope to see you soon here around also in presence then. And thank you again to all the speakers. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to the organizers. We did not square the circle and find all the answers, but I think we at least touched upon the crucial points that we need to discuss in the future. And once again, there are certain Horizon projects. Penel is also coordinating one that are dealing with these issues in the next 3 years. So there's more to come. Thank you very much.